changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark with your daily dose of Chicken Soup for the Soul inspiration. It's Thoughtful Thursday, the day when I get to share a story that made me think and that gave me a useful new perspective. In this story, Celebrating the Tears, Kim Stokely talks about how much she dreaded moving as a young wife. She had lived in the same house for 22 years, but then she married a naval officer, and she had to move a lot as a military wife, but she hadn't realized how difficult it would be. So she turned to her mother-in-law, who moved a lot also as a self-described corporate nomad who never lived anywhere more than 3 years. And Kim said to her mother-in-law, "I don't know how you did it." And her mother-in-law said, "Did what?" And Kim said, "You moved so many times. This is killing me." Kim's mother-in-law said, "I've lived in more houses in more states than I can count, and I listened to a lot of the corporate wives moan and groan with each new transfer. I decided I wasn't going to be one of them. You've got to think of each new move as an adventure." And she said, "I vowed to explore each place as much as I could with the kids. They knew more about every new state than people who had lived there their whole lives, because we didn't take anything for granted. Every vacation, we'd take a road trip to some new corner or historic site." She went on to explain that she viewed each new location as an opportunity for adventure, an opportunity to explore something new with her kids. And then she added that if she hadn't cried when she moved away, it would have meant that she had wasted her time there. So Kim had a completely different attitude after that conversation. She made the most of every new duty station during her next 20 years as a military wife. Her family explored Revolutionary War sites in New England. They panned for gold in California. They slept with sharks in a Florida aquarium. And Kim cried every time she moved because she had fallen in love with each home, getting the most out of every location by acting like a tourist who needed to pack as much as possible into a short time. Kim says, "Even though I cried as I left each home, I celebrated the fact that I hadn't wasted my time." I thought this was a great story. She got more out of her home locations, knowing that she was moving on soon, than most of us do, even if we live in our homes 5 times longer than she did. And after I read that story a few years ago in our book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Home Sweet Home, I resolved that I would start doing more touristy things in my own area. I realized that I was seeing more tourist sites and going to more museums in other cities than in my own city. And I only live an hour from New York City, which has so many great things to offer. When I traveled, I made an effort to see things. At home, I was a lump. That summer, we had friends come in from California, and we had a great time doing something super touristy. We took the Circle Line trip around Manhattan. My husband and I loved it. And it made me wonder why we don't all act a little more like tourists in our own communities. Kim experienced more in a few years in each location than many of us do in places we've lived for decades. I guess it's time to act like we'll be moving, right? Even if we aren't going anywhere. So that was great mother-in-law advice. And I liked that story so much that we have included it in our new Mother's Day book, Chicken Soup for the Soul for Mom with Love. It's a book that just came out, and I happen to be very proud of it because we are viewing it as a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and all the author royalties from the book are going to the Boys and Girls Clubs to help them with all the good work that they do with kids. We do that once in a while. We give the royalties from one of our books to a great cause. And we actually did that with our most recent cat and dog books, too, with some of those royalties going to the American Humane Association. And tomorrow, on Friend Friday, I'm going to introduce you to the very funny Dylan Brody, a well-known humorist and storyteller who has a story in that cat book that we just put out. And he's going to tell us about his rather unusual cat and whatever else he feels like talking about. It should be fun. I'm Amy Newmark. Thank you for listening to the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast. I'd be grateful if you'd help me spread the word by telling your friends. And you can also rate the podcast on our iTunes page. And if you'd like to read more stories from the books I mentioned today, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Home Sweet Home, or Chicken Soup for the Soul for Mom with Love, please go to our website, chickensoup.com.